But long story short, dragons. Hey guys, it's Michaela back again with another video, and it is time for another monthly wrap up, this time for July. I feel like every month I start off really strong, like reading a bunch of books right in a row, and then something happens towards the middle of the month where I guess I just like cease to exist. I just like stop reading and stop existing, I guess. I don't know. And then I usually like pull it back together right at the end of the month. I don't know if this is a pandemic thing. I can't remember what my reading habits were before the pandemic. I can't even remember if there was a before the pandemic. Anyway, these heavy books are the books that I read in July. There are 9 of them, and before you start to comment,
Michaela, you're only holding 8 books, dumbass.
Hold the fuck on, we will get to that. Before we begin, I do want to give just a quick content warning. One of the books I am discussing this month does discuss sexual assault, and while I will not be going into detail on this topic, it will be brought up. I will start with the first book that I read in July, which is The Importance of Being Earnest and Four Other Plays by Oscar Wilde. This book is part of the Barnes & Noble Classic series. As the title suggests, this book contains 5 Oscar Wilde plays: The Importance of Being Earnest, Lady Windermere's Fan, A Woman of No Importance, An Ideal Husband, and Salome or Salome. I'm not quite sure how it's supposed to be pronounced. I read The Importance of Being Earnest in high school, and I remember loving it then, and I was not wrong. It definitely holds up. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I was really happy to read it again. It is such a delight and such a joy. It is still, to this day, one of the best plays I've ever read. I didn't enjoy Lady Windermere's Fan quite as much, but I could definitely see that one being a play that I enjoy seeing more on stage than I do reading it on paper. I know, like, for example, the titular fan is something to sort of like keep an eye on and to track, which is much harder to do when you're reading it than it is when you're like actually seeing it on stage. Even still, I thought the plot was only okay, even though the writing definitely still sparkled in the way that Wilde's writing typically does. I liked A Woman of No Importance a lot more. It reminded me like spiritually a lot of Ernest, even though the plot was actually more similar to Lady Windermere's Fan. Okay, I mean, there actually wasn't that much of a plot to A Woman of No Importance, but like, I don't know, I still laughed a lot. It was still a good time, and that one I enjoyed. An Ideal Husband was probably my favorite of the bunch after Ernest because it had the most engaging plot. Of the 4 comedies in this book, this was the only one that felt like it had real stakes and real events going on. In fact, I would really only call An Ideal Husband a comedy in like the traditional sense of the word, in that comedies have happy endings for the protagonists and tragedies have sad ones, but it's definitely not like haha comedic in the same way as the other 3 are. It's still definitely like funny at times, but like it's definitely the most serious of the 4 I found. But I didn't mind that, and I didn't feel like that took away from anything because I still, like I said, really enjoyed it, mostly because the plot was so good. Salome, which is how I'm pronouncing it because I don't know what's correct. I don't look things up. We've established this. Salome is definitely the most different of the 5 plays. It is a 1-act play, and it is a very dramatic retelling of the beheading of John the Baptist, possibly a different biblical John. I don't know. I certainly didn't pay attention in Catholic school. Anyway, it was weird, but like not in a bad way. I didn't really know how to feel about it at the end, but I would confidently say I didn't not like it. Overall, I gave this collection 4 stars. I found Wilde's writing very easy to follow, easily consumable, and even the plays I didn't like quite as much as the others, I still really enjoyed reading them. I think if you are looking to get into reading plays or classics or Oscar Wilde, this would be a really good place to start. Okay, I am going to be incredibly brief here because I've already waxed poetic about this next book enough. The second book I read this month was A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. This is the sequel to his An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, and this is just as well written and funny and holy shit mind-blowing as the first was. I will link the rant video that I did talking about how much I am obsessed with these books up in the corner, whichever corner it is, because I love you too much to subject you to that again. But yes, this book is absolutely 5 stars, and if you love yourselves, you will read it too after you read the first one. So remember a little while ago when I very rudely told you to hold the fuck on? Well, you can let the fuck go because this next book is 2 in 1. This is The Dragon Riders of Pern by Anne McCaffrey, and this book is actually 3 novels in 1. This book contains Dragonflight, Dragon Quest, and The White Dragon, which are, from what I can tell, the 3 books in the Dragon Riders of Pern series. That being said, I do know that McCaffrey has other novels and short stories written and like set in the world of Pern. I don't really know how it all works. I've owned this book for like a million years and I'm just now getting around to reading it, so the history I once knew about it is long gone. So like I said, there are 3 novels in here. I only read the first 2, Dragonflight and Dragon Quest, and I am counting them separately. If you think that's cheating, I would like to politely inform you that I don't give a fuck. I was actually originally planning on reading all 3 together, but after reading the first 2, which were together about 480 pages, I needed a break because McCaffrey's writing is incredibly dense, and the 4th book is about another 400 pages, so yeah, like I said, I needed a break. So Dragonflight is the first book in the series, and it basically just sets up the plot for the second one. Even though it was the shorter of the 2 novels that I read, like literally it's half the length of the second one, I just felt like it dragged a lot, which is weird because there's actually a huge time jump in this first book that I thought was very jarring and weird. There wasn't a lot that really happened in this book, not in terms of plot or character development. Basically, Dragonflight, which I only gave 3 stars, only exists to set up the second book, which is Dragon Quest. Now, Dragon Quest I enjoyed a lot more. In this book, we got to meet a lot more characters with many more points of view, and we got a much better tour of the world of Pern. There are multiple plot lines going on, and McCaffrey does a really good job of not spending too long on one plot so that you get bored of it or forget what's going on in other plots, but also not bouncing around so much that you never feel like situated or that you get disoriented. We meet a ton of new characters in this book, and all of them are super interesting and detailed and well developed, even the ones who are more like background characters or tertiary characters. Oh, sorry I'm not going into much detail about the plot of these books. There's kind of 2 reasons for that. One is that the plots are incredibly complicated, and the second is that, you know, these books are really old, and so I'm sure if you wanted like a brief but good plot summary, Wikipedia is going to do a much better job than I can. But long story short, dragons. But yeah, like I was saying, Dragon Quest is a much more cohesive novel than Dragonflight was. I had a good time reading it, and I felt much less annoyed with the dense language because there was actually like story and substance to like justify the more difficult language than I felt that there was in the first book. I gave Dragon Quest, the second one, 4 stars, and I'm hoping to get around to reading The White Dragon later this month. So if you happened to hear some high-pitched shrieking seemingly coming from nowhere in the back half of July, that was probably me reading these next 2 books. I have been looking forward to reading these for a very long time, and holy shit was I not disappointed. I am talking about the Check Please graphic novels by Ngozi Ukazu, and guys, these books are just the light of my life. If you don't know, Check Please started out as a webcomic series back in the early 2010s, like 2013 I think, and I used to read them religiously until I just like fell out of it. I talked about this a bit in my indie bookstore haul. Support your local indie. When I found out that they were going to be compiled and sold in physical books, I knew I had to get them or I would die. Like, for real, I am only alive because of these books. These comics are about Biddy, my son, who starts out as a college freshman, and we follow him throughout his 4 years of college. He plays for his college's hockey team, he has a YouTube channel, and he loves to bake, and he's gay. Basically, these books are about Biddy and the team and the camaraderie between them, and hockey culture and ending toxic masculinity and being hella gay, and guys, I'm going to fucking explode. These books are so good. Like, I can't imagine anything better for combating quarantine depression than these books. These books cleared my skin, watered my crops, ended world hunger. They are everything. They are pure joy distilled into a few pounds of very shiny paper. If you want a lovely gay story about bros loving each other, then actually I don't care if that's what you want. It's what you deserve. Read these fucking books, 5 stars. The next book I read could not have been more tonally different from Check Please. I am talking about Shout by Lori Halse Anderson. Shout is a memoir told in poems in which Anderson tells the story of her childhood, her sexual assault, and her life as a survivor and as a person who makes art for sexual assault survivors. I have to admit that for the first chunk of this book, I wasn't a huge fan of Anderson's poetry. To me, a lot of Anderson's early poems in this book felt more like mini essays with just like line breaks put in between. There was nothing inherently poetic about them. That did change though once Anderson started writing about her life after the assault, because I think that the more messy and complicated nature of that topic provided more opportunity for poetry than did the events of her life pre-assault. Over time, the poetry became more technically complicated and interesting, and I found myself connecting more to what she was saying because I was enjoying the way she was saying it. But beyond the poetry itself, Anderson's writing in this book reminded me of someone trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, just turning things over in your hands, trying things from different angles, trying to get to a solution even when a solution might not exist. Toward the end of the book, she sort of leaves her own life and starts musing more on the general human condition, and those thoughts are definitely worth a read. A lot of this book felt like thinking out loud, which really works when you're talking about things like consent and pleasure and joy and interpersonal relationships and truth. Anderson doesn't make any big definitive claims, but more quiet assertions about the things she's learned and the conclusions she's come to. So even though this book had a rocky start for me, I gave it 4 stars, and I would recommend it for someone looking to read something from the perspective of a survivor about assault and about sort of the human condition as a whole. For this next book, I will once again be brief because I already made an entire video about it. It is At the Wolf's Table by Rosella Postorino. This is an Italian book translated into English about a woman who was forced to be one of Hitler's food taste testers in World War II. It was a pretty wild ride of a book, and I will link that video up in the corner as well if you are interested. I gave this book 4 stars. Finally, the last book I read in July was Dry by Neil and Jared Schusterman, a father-son writing duo. We love to see it. This is one of the most tense books I have ever read in my life. It's a speculative fiction novel about what would happen if Southern California very suddenly and very completely ran out of water. Now guys, I live in Florida, one of the most humid places on planet Earth. I am far, far, far more likely to drown than I am to ever run out of water. This book made me so goddamn paranoid that I was going to run out of water that I kept having to suppress the urge to just go out and stock up on bottled water for no reason. There is no drought in Florida. Florida's problem is that we have too much water. This guy keeps dumping it on us. But the water crisis in this book is so well written that I could not stop the panic rising in me for a problem that is not real. Not that the water crisis isn't real, but that the specific situation in this book is not real, and it's also not real for me. Again, you can walk outside and chew the air. It's so thick. Because this book is speculative fiction, it proposes a lot of questions that it then seeks to answer. What if LA ran out of water? How would rich people react? What would happen to poor people? How would neighbors treat each other? What would people prioritize? How would the government respond? Local, state, federal? In what ways would humans seek to organize, and in what ways would we devolve into chaos? The Schustermans provide their answers to these questions and a million others, and while I definitely think another writer or another writing pair could answer those questions differently, I think that the answers they provide are logically very solid and supported by the text itself. My biggest problem with this book, and it is a problem so big that it's the reason I gave this book a 4 and not a 5, is that one of the protagonists, Kelton, is such a fucking douche that I wanted to physically hurt him. The main character of the story is a girl named Alyssa, who I'm pretty sure is 15 because she doesn't have her permit yet. But we also follow her younger brother Garrett, her next door neighbor Kelton, a 19-year-old girl named Jackie, and a boy named Henry. This book follows the gang as they try to get to a place with water, and the interpersonal dynamics of the 5 of them are fascinating. My big problem, though, is that, like I said, we are definitely supposed to like Kelton. And I know we are, and I'll tell you why in a sec. And I could not fucking stand him from the first page. He's basically your classic incel type. Loves guns and weapons, creepily stalks Alyssa, whom he's been obsessed with forever. is like determined to be the hero of the group. He just sucks. I was in a JROTC unit in high school, and he reminds me of like half the assholes in that unit. So I have the Barnes & Noble like exclusive edition of this book, which means that in the back there are these chapter by chapter notes from the authors, because there's two of them, explaining sort of why they made certain decisions and why they chose to reveal certain information when they did, and like that's cool and whatever. But multiple times in the notes, particularly in the beginning, the Schustermans talk about how they set up Kelton's character arc, like this big arc about his big growth, except he doesn't have one. He doesn't grow at all, with the exception of like the shared trauma that like everyone in the gang goes through. He doesn't change. Kelton is given all of these gross, douchey personality traits at the beginning of the book, and there's no indication that they go away, because like, yes, they're not as bad while the crisis is happening, but this book pretty much ends right when this very discreet crisis ends. So we don't get to see the person he is once this is all over. We have no actual indication that he's changed at all. And then just throughout the book in general, we see his like hero complex thing. It like never really goes away. I don't know. He never stopped being incredibly fucking annoying to me. And the fact that the book pushed the reader to like him so hard also really annoyed me. The notes at the end of this book were like weird too. Like there was this weird attitude about them. Like the Schustermans were mad that they were doing this. I'll give you an example. So early on, either Alyssa or Garrett, who like I said are brother and sister, and I can't remember which one of them, but one of them sort of makes a throwaway comment about how no one can tell what they are, you know, ethnically or racially. It's an incredibly tiny moment that like doesn't really relate to anything else. It's just something one of them says, and I took that to mean, and what I think is a very reasonable interpretation of that line, to mean that they are mixed race. And then later on, around the halfway point, the gang is sort of like just like having a conversation about their backgrounds, and we find out that Alyssa and Garrett are mixed race. They have like 4 different heritages for like 4 different grandparents. I don't remember what the breakdown is. I know that one of them is Jamaican, and I think one of them is like Dutch. This wasn't something that was like a big part of the story. Like race didn't really ever come into the actual plot. This is just like a nice small piece of like character building, that we know this thing about these characters, but like I said, didn't factor into the events of the story. But in the note for that chapter where we find out what their ethnicity is, the Schustermans wrote, "It was our intention to challenge readers' assumptions. We never said what ethnicity they were. If you were assuming they were white, that's your bad. As Henry suggests, their ancestors hail from multiple continents. We wanted to celebrate the fact that they're not just one single thing, but rather humans that are defined by more than their ethnic makeup, as we all are." It's just like weirdly aggressive. First of all, that was not the first time that their ethnicity was discussed, because like I said, it was mentioned very early on, which is why I came to the early conclusion that they were mixed race, which I was right. And like I said, because it was brought up early on, I don't really think, I mean, I guess some people might come to the conclusion or make the assumption that they're white, but that's an assumption that's almost directly contradicted by the text itself. So at that point, it's like not an assumption, but more like a misreading of the text. And there's also like some weird virtue signaling here that like doesn't make sense. It's our fault as readers for assuming someone is white, but then they're also playing the "we only see one race," the human race card. And I'm just like, I'm not about it. There were more things like that in those notes that really put me off. So even though I found their decision-making process really interesting, and, you know, as a writer, I liked to know how they, you know, came to certain conclusions, by the end, I just wanted to tell them to shut the fuck up. Still, the novel itself, other than that one very unbearable character, was extremely well written and extremely thought out and intelligent. I do definitely recommend it, even though after all that, it sounds like I don't. I definitely do. It was very good. So those were the 9 books that I read in July. Let me know if you have any thoughts on them in the comments below. I haven't been saying this in videos recently, but if I talk about a book in a video, the link to that book's Goodreads page is going to be in the description below. So if you want to find out more about it, it's going to be down there. So guys, I've got to be honest with you. Even though I have actually already started reading for August, next month's wrap up might be extra short because, yeah, I got a Nintendo Switch and I have never been happier or more easily distracted in my entire life. I have been going hard at Breath of the Wild and the new Paper Mario, but I'm going to try very hard not to let reading go by the wayside. But this is my first game console, y'all, and I finally feel like a functioning member of society. Okay, that is all that I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye!